Welcome to the second episode of Fully Functional.
A talk show about health, wellness, and so much more.
I'm Dr. Galina, naturopathic doctor.
I'm Beata Rydyger, registered nutritionist. And today we have a very special episode. It's the summer season, so it is the perfect time to actually get this vitamin in quite a large quantity, thanks to all the sunlight that we're getting. And if you haven't guessed yet, it is vitamin D.
Yeah, and vitamin D is actually my favorite vitamin. It's one of those really well-rounded, miracle type of nutrients that many people have heard of and know things about it, but don't really understand it well. So we're here to break some of that down.
Yes, there's a lot of questions that's surrounding vitamin D, a lot of different research coming out. So we want to sort of address these topics surrounding this very unique and important vitamin. So what makes vitamin D so unique? It is a fat-soluble vitamin, and that's the difference between fat-soluble and water-soluble. Fat-soluble is just much more easily retained by the body, and it takes a whole body participation for its manufacturing. So it's called the sunshine vitamin for a reason. The skin is the first organ to so it interacts with the UV rays from the sunlight. And from then on, the liver, the kidneys are involved in its processing into its active form, which is vitamin D3.
And that's usually what we end up supplementing with when a person is deficient, that active form, the vitamin D3. Mm-hmm. And what's really important to note, though, is that it's enough to get your vitamin D from the sunlight if you're just trying to maintain healthy levels that you have already. Mm-hmm. But, vitamin D deficiency is almost like in epidemic proportions, honestly. What was that percentage we had talked about earlier?
Yeah, it was roughly 42% of people in general, the general population, are deficient of vitamin D. And that could, that statistic is based on a population that it could be, the elderly, which are more vulnerable to vitamin D deficiency as they're less prone to being exposed to enough sun exposure. And also when you age, your skin's ability to manufacture vitamin D decreases. So obviously the older you get, the higher percentage that you may sort of decrease your body's ability to produce this vitamin. So, the more reason to supplement and get that through food as well.
That's really interesting. Not a lot of nutrients are as age dependent as vitamin D is, right? So that's a really interesting fact to understand. And let's talk about some of the benefits of vitamin D, right? We said before, it's an all-around vitamin used by most organ systems.
So there's a receptor almost at every, tissue in the human body. So
that's pretty wild to think about.
Yeah, it almost acts like a hormone. It's sterol based, so it's cholesterol based, much like a hormone is, and it travels to various areas of the body through the bloodstream.
Something interesting that you mentioned, actually, vitamin D is actually a precursor for a lot of our hormones.
That's right.
When you don't have enough vitamin D, some of the
that's interesting. Yeah, I didn't think about
some of the issues that people have, especially women, is hormonal imbalance. But also vitamin D is important for your mood, so for brain function, for bone building, and definitely for the immune system, which is it's a super important topic nowadays, right? And everything. So
speaking of immunity, I mean, not getting enough vitamin D can cause autoimmune diseases, right? Crohn's disease, even digestive issues like GERD, gastrointestinal issues. So
and the second you get any kind of cold or virus or anything, your immune system wants to mobilize vitamin D in order to boost its efficiency and effectiveness. But if you don't have enough of vitamin D, that presents as a problem, obviously, for your immunity.
It may cause demineralization, right? If you don't have enough D, your body pulls calcium from the bones and can cause rickets in kids, osteoporosis in adults. So very important to sort of avoid deficiency in the first place. So we want to make sure that we're getting enough, essentially.
And you know what's interesting? I read a study. The study was based in Hawaii, right? And Hawaii, we think of as a really sunny state or really sunny place where, people would generally get a lot of sun, right? And spend a lot of time outdoors in such a state, right? So the study basically, tested a group of people that would be getting direct sunlight for 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. And we'll link this study below, but what's interesting, the findings said that, let's see here, 51% of this population still had low vitamin D status. That is people that are getting at least 15 hours of sunlight on a weekly basis, and their vitamin D is still low. That's pretty drastic.
And again, that conversion into its active form, it takes a few, pathways in the body. So you have to have sort of an efficient, functional, organs to essentially process into its active form. So you have to have, it's best to have optimal health, essentially.
Right.
So if
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
if you have issues, with liver or kidneys or, could cause
Absolutely.
issues.
Another thing, just because you use the word optimal, we're all about optimal, right? Something important to understand is, when you look at a lab result for vitamin D, right? And it says the range is 30 to 100. And let's say someone comes in with a level of 35, let's say they think, oh, great, my vitamin D is in range. But really that's such, misconception. An optimal vitamin D level would be 60 to 80, right? So having a level of 30 is definitely still problematic. And obviously anything below 30 is, a really severe deficiency, right? And so based on those results, based on the proper testing and based on that information is how we would then know what the best optimal dosage of vitamin D is for you, right? So, the dosages can range from as little as like 400 IU, and IU is the way we dose vitamin D, basically kind of like milligrams, but this is dosed in IUs, or these are units of vitamin D basically. So, it could range as little as 400 to up to like 10,000, and it could still be safe just depending on what your level is, right? And of course there are, issues with vitamin D toxicity, and that's something I know Beata wanted to mention too, right?
Yeah, I mean, overexposure to sunlight is obviously, it could be an issue, and it could lead to toxicity where you just are sort of producing too much vitamin D. But, that's almost, it could be a fact in certain parts of the world, but in others, countries that have the 4 seasons, where people just don't get enough sunlight, that's less probable.
And something I wanted to touch base on the supplementation of it, right? So there's so many options for vitamin D supplements. It's probably the most popular supplement people use, right? So, you can have vitamin D in capsule form, tablet form, liquid form, right? Ultimately, because it is a fat soluble vitamin, it should be taken with a fat, right? Or with a meal, unless it already comes in an oil-based form, then you can take it on its own, just that supplement alone. But also recent studies have shown that vitamin D taken along with something called vitamin K2 is better absorbed. They have like a synergistic action. So, you can take vitamin D alone, but if you want for maximum effectiveness, actually vitamin D plus K2 will give you the best outcome. But you can also get vitamin D from food, right?
Yeah, so food sources, I mean, the best way to sort of get vitamin D, I always say, is sunlight and diet, and supplementation, obviously, it's probably best to do anyway, just to make sure that, because the probability of being deficient is so high, that just to make sure that, you fall into the healthy range. Like I said, it's always good to get tested first and see where you lie on the spectrum. But of course, diet is number one to get all our nutrients, right? So, there's the artificial way, which is supplementation, and the natural way. So sunlight, first and foremost, I think is the best way to get vitamin D. And then secondly, diet. So diet sources, not too many. One of the best sources is cod liver oil. So oily fish, herring, mackerel, salmon, sardines, fantastic source of vitamin D. Egg yolks, grass-fed butter, And then, there are plant-based sources as well, like mushrooms and dark leafy greens. However, they contain a type of vitamin D that is not as readily available and not as readily used by the body. So it's called esterol. So it's a form of D2 and not D3. So we want that active form. And unfortunately, plant sources of vitamin D they don't provide that active form of vitamin D, but it's still a source. You can still, your body still can convert it. It just takes so much longer.
What about the foods that are like fortified with vitamin D, cereals, for example, a lot of people think they're going to give their kids cereal and that's enough to get the vitamin D, in their system.
Yeah. So this is a synthetic form of vitamin D. So, and again, it's most likely a source of the inactive vitamin D2. So, I wouldn't rely on fortified foods to get optimal levels of vitamin D. Like I said, best source is animal-based, and it's cod liver oil. Oily fish is number one. Egg yolk, like I said, grass-fed butter. These are,
and cod liver oil,
lard, liver, but I'm sure it doesn't sound as delectable, but these are also good sources.
Sounds pretty good to me, but cod liver oil actually, it comes in a supplement form as well, right? So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's either it's available in capsule or in actual oil form. So whatever works for you, but yeah.
We just, we really just want to clear up misconceptions about vitamin D. Some people are scared of it. Some people don't understand how much is needed. So, we're hoping that this conversation really kind of opens up your eyes to, the facts.
Yeah. And just to touch on, again, what I think is the best source of vitamin D, which is sunlight. There's this misconception that sun exposure will automatically lead to skin cancer. Now, I don't want to speak to that topic of cancer because, I don't feel comfortable talking about it and linking anything conclusively to cancer, but 20 minutes of sun exposure a day, it won't do you any harm. And in fact, slathering on sunscreen all over your body and exposing yourself to the sun will just not provide you with enough exposure of UV rays to manufacture vitamin D. So get out there, best to get out there early, like mid-morning, early afternoon, get that 20 minutes, sunscreen free, as much of your skin surface exposed as possible. So in a bathing suit, bikini, whatever. And yeah, get that 20 minutes in a day. And that's all it really takes, to maintain and increase your vitamin D levels naturally.
And you know what, it's interesting too, like, a lot of my patients that I see, pretty much with everyone, we end up testing, their nutrients, and vitamin D is one of the things we test. And honestly, no matter what we're working on, whether it's hormone balance, right, or gut issues, most patients are always, not always, but usually always deficient in vitamin D. So no matter what the protocol is, vitamin D will always be included as a priority in that protocol. I can't state enough how important it is for pretty much every system in your body, for every pathway in your body, for every process that happens in the body. Exactly. Vitamin D is just essential.
Yeah. I just, lastly, if we want to just quickly touch base on calcium. So, as we know, calcium works synergistically with D and phosphorus, right? So supplementing with calcium and phosphorus alone for bone health just isn't sufficient. Right. D3 has to also be included in order for that calcium to be utilized efficiently by the body. Correct?
That is a great point. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, vitamin D should be just part of your daily regimen. Again, whether it's, building your bones, boosting your immune system, improving your mood, working your hormones, vitamin D should be a constant, a staple in your, supplement cabinet for sure. Right.
Yeah. And that's a good point coming from, a naturopathic doctor. There are natural ways to get your vitamin D, but it's also, like you said, important to supplement because there are so little sources of vitamin D. And not everyone can get a daily dose of sunlight, right?
Yeah.
Especially for those countries that have the 4 seasons, and especially during the winter time. Now, can you repeat again how many IUs you would recommend, like in the summer versus in the winter?
Sure. So let's start with, for someone that has under 30, which is 30 is like the normal acceptable range. For anyone that's under 30, no matter what season you're in, you should be at least taking 5,000 IU. And if it's wintertime, I would say 10,000 IU. Okay. Anything under 30. If you're about 30 and above, 5,000 honestly is a great maintenance dose. You definitely don't need as much as 10,000. If you get up to a level of like 60, you can get away with going down to 2,000 IU daily. That's fine too. I would say 2,000 is a good maintenance dose. I have a little interesting anecdote. I had a patient that took vitamin D 5,000 IU for literally 2 months and went from like a level of 30 to like a level of 80 plus. And I was like, and I mean, that means their body just like really took to it. That's not always the case, but you can make a significant difference in the smallest amount of time if you're dosing this properly. So anything up to 10,000 IU is safe. Again, depending on your results. If you're below 30, 10,000 IU will always be safe for you.
Yeah, I agree as well. I tend to sort of, for people who are quite deficient, I'd say I start them off at 10,000. But for maintenance, I would say minimum 2.
Minimum 2,
yeah.
And then something else interesting, medical doctors like to prescribe vitamin D nowadays too, but what they'll do is, they'll give you a prescription for the vitamin D, but they'll give you 1 pill per week. So they'll give you a 50,000 IU pill per week, right? So, that's, when you break it up, it's obviously less than 5,000 a day, right? But I really don't like this approach, this 1 pill for the week. I'd rather you take it daily. It will give you that much more benefit.
More spread out dosage.
It will give your body time to utilize it, to absorb it, to understand what's happening. If you just give it that 1 pop of 50,000 IU per week, I think it's,
you want to have that daily dose as well, just like you want it from, a daily dose of sunlight. You want a daily dose of vitamin D. It's not just a one-time, one-hit wonder. It's, you want to have it every day. Also too, that's interesting to note is timing of taking vitamin D. So taking it in the morning is optimal. Taking it in the evening actually reduces the function of melatonin, the production of melatonin. So, melatonin is involved in our sleep, right? For efficient sleep. So you want to be taking your vitamin D as early in the day as possible.
I always say by lunchtime, you should have had your dose of vitamin D. Yeah, absolutely.
So anyway, so that was our little vitamin D chat. Thank you, Dr. Galina.
And thank you, Beata.
You're welcome. And if you guys have any questions, please feel free to share in the comments. We're always happy to answer any concerns that you may have. Get out there, enjoy the sunlight, be safe, and enjoy the summer.
Get that vitamin D.
Get that vitamin D. Bye.
Bye.